Good to see you in a new video on Betrayal Wife Tales. Today I'm going to tell you an interesting story of our subscriber.
It started with something so small that I barely noticed it. My wife, Jess, had been acting a little distant, a bit off, but I chalked it up to stress. Life had gotten busy lately, work, family gatherings, and keeping up with the day-to-day grind. We've been married for 7 years, and I thought we had a solid relationship. But looking back, I realize how blind I was, how many signs I missed. We were at a family barbecue, one of those casual Sunday afternoons that felt routine. My older brother, Rick, was there, as he always was. He's the life of the party, the guy everyone gravitates toward with his loud laugh and effortless charm. We've always been close, ever since we were kids. I never imagined he'd be the one to blow up my entire life. Jess and Rick had always gotten along, maybe too well, but I never gave it much thought. I trusted her, and Rick was my brother. Family is family, right? Still, I remember that day vividly now. The way they were laughing together by the grill, how her hand brushed against his arm, the subtle look in their eyes when they thought no one was watching. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. Little things started to add up. Jess suddenly became more secretive with her phone, her laughter becoming a bit too forced when I'd ask her about her day. We weren't as close anymore, and I convinced myself it was just a rough patch, that marriages go through phases, until I found the text. It was late, and Jess had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I'd never been the type to snoop, but that night I couldn't resist. I opened her phone, and there it was, a message from Rick, simple but loaded with meaning. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." My heart dropped. I stared at the text, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. It had to be a joke, right? Some kind of stupid prank between siblings-in-law? My chest tightened as my mind raced for any explanation that didn't involve the obvious truth. Jess came down the hall, her footsteps sending a wave of panic through me. I quickly locked her phone and shoved it back onto the counter, pretending to scroll through mine as if nothing had happened. My heart was pounding, but I tried to act normal. No way could I confront her, not yet. I needed to know more, to be sure. That night, as Jess slid into bed beside me, I felt the distance between us more than ever. She leaned in to kiss me goodnight, her lips brushing my cheek as if nothing was wrong. I felt sick, wondering if Rick had been with her just before this. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that never came. The next few days were torture. I watched them both closely, looking for any clue, any slip-up. They were careful, too careful, but every now and then, I'd catch a quick glance exchanged between them, a lingering touch when they thought I wasn't paying attention. It felt like a bad dream, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I started going through her phone whenever I could, trying to piece together the story behind that text. Most of the conversations were deleted, but a few stray messages slipped through. There were no more direct confessions like the first text, just casual exchanges that seemed innocent to anyone else. But I knew better now. "Can you come by the house on Friday? I'll be alone." "We can talk later. Can't wait to see you." The pit in my stomach deepened with each message. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my back. How long had this been going on? Was it just texts? Or had it turned into something worse, something physical? I didn't want to believe it, but my gut told me otherwise. I tried to push it aside, telling myself that maybe I was reading too much into things. Jess had been acting differently, yes, but maybe it wasn't what I feared. Maybe she and Rick were just close? But the rationalizations fell apart each time I saw them together, laughing in a way they never had before. The casual touches, the knowing smiles, they all pointed to something I couldn't ignore. The worst part? I couldn't tell anyone. Who would I go to? My friends? They'd think I was crazy. My family? What could I say? That I thought my wife was cheating on me with my own brother? It was too unreal, too twisted. So I kept it bottled up, trying to maintain the facade of normalcy while my insides churned with suspicion. But I knew I couldn't live like this forever. Something had to give. It came to a head one night, a week after I'd found that first message. Jess was out with friends, and I was home alone, stewing in my thoughts. I'd had enough. I needed to know the truth, once and for all. I grabbed my keys and drove to Rick's place, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I pulled into his driveway. His car was there, lights on inside. My heart raced as I approached the door, but just as I lifted my hand to knock, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this was all some horrible misunderstanding? But then, through the window, I saw her, Jess, sitting on Rick's couch, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. And that was when I knew. My hands froze at the door, a wave of nausea hitting me as I stared through the window. There they were, my wife and my brother, sitting so comfortably together. I had imagined this moment in a dozen ways, none of them compared to the crushing weight of actually seeing it. Jess leaned in closer to Rick, her laughter soft and intimate, like they were sharing some inside joke. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the touch. It was the look in their eyes, a look I hadn't seen in my own marriage in months. I stood there, frozen, trying to will my feet to move, my hand to knock, but I couldn't. A part of me wanted to barge in, to scream, to demand answers, but another part, the cowardly part, didn't want to face what I knew was coming. If I opened that door, there was no going back. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. I backed away from the house, my mind spinning. I needed space, time to think. I couldn't confront them. Not yet. Not without a plan. I got back in my car and drove aimlessly, my mind replaying that moment over and over again. The sight of Jess laughing with Rick, the way she looked so happy, happier than she had been with me in what felt like forever. I barely slept that night. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Every memory of Jess and Rick together, every laugh, every smile, took on new meaning. How long had this been going on? How many family gatherings had they been sneaking around right under my nose? My brother, the one person I trusted most, betraying me in the worst way imaginable. And my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, lying to my face. The next morning, Jess acted like nothing had happened. She came home late from drinks with friends, slipping into bed beside me without a second thought. I lay there, pretending to be asleep, my body rigid as she curled up next to me. Her scent, the warmth of her skin, it all felt foreign now, like she belonged to someone else. I couldn't even look at her, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I needed to confront her, to make her tell me the truth. But how? What was the right way to accuse your wife of sleeping with your brother? How do you even start that conversation? I spent the day at work, distracted and on edge, barely able to focus on anything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from Jess. Can you pick up dinner tonight? I've got a lot to catch up on at work. Work. Right. I clenched my teeth, resisting the urge to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I texted back something neutral, pretending like everything was fine, but it wasn't fine, not even close. That evening, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit in the shadows anymore. I deserved answers, and I was going to get them. When Jess came home, I was ready. She walked in, her smile casual, like nothing had changed. I could barely look at her. We ate dinner in near silence, the air between us thick with tension. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of the inevitable confrontation that was coming. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Jess, I said, my voice low but firm, we need to talk. She looked up from her plate, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. About what? I stared at her for a long moment. The words caught in my throat, but I forced them out. About Rick. Her fork clattered onto her plate. The color drained from her face as her eyes widened, and in that moment, I saw it. The guilt. The panic. She knew. She knew. I'd found out. What do you mean? She stammered, her voice shaking as she tried to play innocent. But it was too late for lies. Don't. I cut her off, my voice harsher than I intended. Don't lie to me. I know. Jess froze, her eyes wide, like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence hung heavy between us, a suffocating weight. I could see her mind racing, trying to decide whether to keep up the lie or come clean. My heart pounded in my chest, but I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally whispered, her voice shaky, eyes darting away from mine. That was it, the last straw. The denial, the blatant refusal to face the truth after everything I'd seen. I felt something inside me snap. Don't insult me, Jess. I saw you, I said, each word deliberate, measured, but boiling with barely controlled rage. I saw you with him at Rick's place. I've seen the texts. So, drop the act. Just tell me the truth. Her face went pale, and for a second I thought she might faint. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears welled up in her eyes, and I knew she had nothing left to hide behind. This was the moment of reckoning. She looked down, avoiding my gaze, her hands trembling as she pushed her plate away. Her breathing was shallow, like she was on the verge of breaking down. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jess spoke. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, choking back a sob. I stared at her, feeling the anger and betrayal rise up in me like a tidal wave. Then why did it? How long, Jess? How long have you been sneaking around with him? Her tears spilled over now, streaming down her face. She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head as if she could somehow erase what had been done. It's not what you think. It's not. How long? I demanded, my voice louder now, cutting through her excuses. 6 months, she blurted out, her voice cracking. It's been 6 months. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 6 months. Half a year of my life. Of our life. Wasted on a lie. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of it all. The family barbecues, the birthday parties, the late nights when I thought she was just tired. All of it a lie. And with Rick, my own brother, my fists clenched at my sides as the reality of it hit me like a freight train. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break something, but I couldn't. The rage simmered just beneath the surface, but I kept it contained. Barely. Why? I asked, my voice quieter now, hollow. Why him? Why my brother? Jess wiped her eyes, her body shaking with sobs. I don't know, she whispered. It just happened. At first it was nothing, just talking, joking around, but then it got complicated. I never wanted it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you. The absurdity of her words stung like a slap to the face. You never wanted to hurt me? I said, incredulous. How could you not know this would destroy me? You've been lying to me for 6 months, with my own brother. How could you do this? She sobbed harder, her whole body trembling now, but I felt nothing but cold fury. I wasn't going to let her tears manipulate me this time, not after everything. I was confused. Rick and I. It was never supposed to be like this. I don't even know what we're doing anymore, she sobbed, her words barely making sense. I shook my head, feeling disgusted, not just with her, but with myself, forever trusting her for being so blind. You destroyed everything, Jess. Do you get that? You've blown up our marriage, our family. For what? For him? She looked up at me then, her face wet with tears, her eyes pleading. I didn't want to fall for him, I swear, but I just felt so lost, so disconnected from you. And Rick, he was there. He understood me in ways that you didn't anymore. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just the affair, it was the betrayal of everything we had built. I thought we were in this together, working through life's ups and downs as a team. But now I was realizing that Jess had checked out long before I ever noticed. She had turned to Rick, of all people, to fill whatever void she felt in our relationship. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, now a stranger to me. So what now? I asked, my voice quiet but deadly serious. Do you love him? Are you planning on leaving me for him? She shook her head frantically, her sobs growing louder. No, I don't love him. I love you. I don't even know what this is anymore. It was a mistake, all of it. Please, Mike, I don't want to lose you. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between anger and devastation, unsure which way to fall. You already lost me, Jess. The second you slept with him, you lost me. She reached out to touch my hand, but I recoiled, stepping back. Don't, I snapped, my voice shaking. Don't touch me. Her face crumpled, and she collapsed into sobs again, burying her face in her hands. I stood there, watching her fall apart, feeling nothing but numb. The woman I had loved, the life we had built together was gone. Everything had changed in the blink of an eye. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to walk out the door and never look back. But another part of me, some small wounded part, still wanted to fight, to save what little was left. Could I even do that? Could I ever look at her the same way again? But there was one more person I had to confront before I could even begin to figure out what came next. The next day, I felt like I was moving through a fog. Jess and I barely spoke, the weight of her confession sitting between us like a wall we couldn't cross. I didn't know what to do with her, or with us. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I had to face Rick. My mind played over every scenario, imagining how the confrontation would go. I pictured yelling, fists flying, the kind of dramatic showdown you see in movies. But when I got to his place that afternoon, I wasn't angry. I was exhausted, drained. It felt like I had nothing left inside me. Rick opened the door, a grin on his face, as if nothing was wrong. The sight of his smile made my stomach turn. The audacity of it. He had no idea I knew. I could see his casual, relaxed demeanor, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Mike! Hey, man, he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were just two brothers catching up. I didn't waste any time. I stepped past him into his living room, the tension already thick in the air. Where's Jess? He asked, looking around, confused. I turned to face him, my eyes locked on his. I know Rick, I said flatly, my voice cold, emotionless. His face twisted in confusion for a second. Know what? He asked, but I could see the shift in his eyes, the realization creeping in. I know about you and Jess, about what you've been doing behind my back, I said, my voice low but steady. The blood drained from his face, and suddenly, the cocky, easygoing guy I knew was gone. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The silence between us felt like it lasted forever. Finally, Rick tried to stammer out an excuse. Mike, Don't. I cut him off, shaking my head. Don't even try to explain it. I've heard enough lies from her. I don't need them from you. He stared at me, guilt and shame washing over his face. I'm sorry, he muttered, his voice weak. I never meant for this to happen. I swear it just got out of control. Out of control? I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. You're my brother, Rick. How could you do this to me? How could you look me in the eye, come to my house, and pretend like everything was fine while you were screwing my wife? He didn't have an answer. He just stood there, looking down at the floor like a coward. The silence between us grew unbearable, and I felt the anger building up inside me again. I wanted to hit him, to hurt him the way he had hurt me. But as I stood there, fists clenched, I realized something. Rick wasn't worth it. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking, not with rage, but with sorrow. "We were brothers, man. I would have done anything for you, and this is how you repay me? By stealing my wife?" Rick finally looked up, his eyes filled with regret, but it didn't matter anymore. Nothing he could say would undo the damage. "I'm sorry, Mike," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, you did," I snapped. "You both did." The pain in my chest felt overwhelming, like I couldn't breathe. My own brother, the person I had trusted more than anyone, had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. And for what? Some secret fling with my wife? Was it worth it to him? Did he even care about the destruction he had caused? I shook my head, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Rick," I said, my voice quieter now. "You've destroyed everything. My marriage, our family. I can't even look at you." Rick looked like he wanted to say more, to beg for my forgiveness, but I didn't want to hear it. I turned to leave, needing to get out of that house, away from him. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. As I walked to the door, Rick called after me, his voice desperate. "Mike, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and turned back to him. "There's nothing to fix, Rick. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." I walked out, slamming the door behind me. The drive home was a blur. I don't even remember getting there. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I felt empty. There was no anger left, no energy to fight, just exhaustion. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house that no longer felt like home. Jess was inside, waiting for me. I knew I had to face her to figure out what came next. But as I sat there, the enormity of it all hit me like a tidal wave. My marriage was over. My relationship with my brother was shattered. Everything I thought I could rely on had crumbled beneath me. I walked inside, and Jess was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me, hopeful, like she still thought there was something left to save. "What did you do?" she asked softly, her voice shaking. "I confronted him," I said flatly, unable to look at her. "It's over." Jess started sobbing again, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I just stood there, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of the past few weeks bearing down on me. "I'll stay at a friend's tonight," I said after a long silence, my voice devoid of emotion. "We need some space. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow." She didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg me to stay. She knew this was the end. As I packed a bag and walked out of the house, I realized I didn't feel relief. There was no sense of closure, no sense of victory in walking away. Just a deep, hollow sadness that I couldn't shake. The life I had known, the family I had loved, was gone. And there was no going back.
Good to see you in a new video on Betrayal Wife Tales. Today I'm going to tell you an interesting story of our subscriber.
This is my first time sharing anything like this online, and honestly, I never thought I would. I'm turning 78 this July, and after all the things I've been through, it feels like the right time to get this story out there. I'm not here for sympathy, but the truth is, I'm dying. I was diagnosed with lung cancer, and I don't expect to have much time left. So, before it's too late, I want to share my life, the parts I can still remember, especially with those younger than me. Maybe it'll mean something to someone. I got married when I was just 19, back in 1967. It feels like a lifetime ago, like I'm not even the same man I used to be. Back then, I was in great shape, strong, always working hard. Now, I'm confined to this wheelchair. Life has a way of wearing you down, doesn't it? My wife, Sarah, and I both had to work from the start because I couldn't make enough to support us on my own. I worked in construction, long hours in the sun, and she took whatever job she could find, usually cleaning hotel rooms. We never had kids, not that we didn't try, but it just never happened. That gave us the weekends to ourselves, at least in the beginning. We were young and had plenty of fun, and I don't think we ever argued much. But those memories are so far behind me now, it's hard to piece together every detail. As the years passed, I started making better money. Sarah was finally able to quit her job, and for a while, it seemed like things were looking up. But as with many things in life, it didn't last. I worked longer hours, late into the night, and our marriage, well, it changed. If I'm honest, it turned more into a close friendship than a marriage. We barely had any intimacy after a while. I still loved her, but something shifted, something I didn't know how to fix. I wasn't around enough, and she probably felt alone. Looking back, I know it was my fault. I let my job take over my life, and it slowly pulled us apart. If I could go back, I would have done things differently. But as you'll see later, this wasn't the only mistake I made. Still, this one, I should have seen coming and done something about before it was too late. One night, I came home from a long shift, just like any other night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. Sarah had dinner ready and the TV was already on, tuned to the baseball game. That used to be my favorite way to unwind back then, watching the game with a cold drink in hand. We chatted in the kitchen for a bit, just small talk, and then I went to the bedroom to change out of my dusty work clothes. When I opened the door, though, something caught my eye. There, sitting right on my nightstand, was a box of condoms. My heart sank immediately. I had a vasectomy years ago, so condoms were never something we needed. I knew right then something was wrong, and panic set in. I stormed back into the kitchen and confronted her, asking why they were there. She froze, completely blindsided, and didn't have an explanation ready. I saw the look on her face change, and before I knew it, she broke down in tears. That's when she told me the truth. She'd been cheating on me. She confessed that she'd invited a guy from work over while I was at my job, and they had been having sex in our home. That box of condoms was just something she'd forgotten to get rid of before I came back. The shock of it all hit me hard. I'm not ashamed to admit that I cried right there in front of her. Years of marriage, loyalty, and trust had crumbled in seconds. I tried to understand why. I asked her, desperate for some reason that would make sense. She told me she wasn't attracted to me anymore, that she felt lonely, and that, truth be told, she never really enjoyed the intimacy we once shared. I was at a loss for words. My whole world felt like it was unraveling in front of me, and I didn't know how to fix it. In the end, I couldn't even stay in the house that night. I just left. We filed for divorce after 19 years of marriage. It was messy and painful, but there was no going back after that. By the time I hit my 40s, I was a wreck. The divorce had gutted me, and I lost all sense of who I was. Confidence, gone, motivation to keep going, barely hanging on. I turned to drinking, heavily. What started as a few beers to numb the pain quickly spiraled out of control, and before I knew it, I was an alcoholic. It took me nearly 2 decades, until I was in my 60s, to finally kick the habit for good. But during those years, I couldn't even stand to look at myself in the mirror. I'd think, what kind of man am I now? A failure, that's what. I wanted to date again. Hell, I craved companionship, but every time I thought about it, I'd remember what Sarah had said, that she wasn't attracted to me, that she'd never really enjoyed sex with me. It haunted me. I started to wonder if it was true. Maybe I was bad in bed and I just never knew it. Those thoughts tore me apart. I had no answers, only doubts. Physically, I tried to hold on to what I could. My skin started to sag and wrinkle a bit, especially on the back of my legs, but I kept myself in shape for as long as possible. I wasn't ready to completely give up on myself. During my marriage, I was convinced she enjoyed our sex life. I took pride in being a tough guy, and back in my 30s, I'd keep that image up, even in bed. I'd wear my bandana, and she seemed to love it. I wasn't selfish either. I'd go down on her whenever she wanted, and I used cock rings to make sure I could maintain a strong erection. When I climaxed, it was intense, and I know that was something she liked. In my mind, I was doing everything right. If I gave my all, what more could I have done? But as time passed, my perspective changed. I started to accept that maybe sex didn't need to define me anymore. Maybe it didn't matter as much in the grand scheme of things, especially as I got older. About 5 years ago, I finally took the leap and started dating again. The woman I'm with now is wonderful. We don't have a very active sex life, but she's reassured me time and again that there's nothing wrong with me. I believe her. After all the struggles, it's comforting to know that there's more to a relationship than just physical intimacy. I remarried just last year, and for the first time in a long time, I felt true happiness again. My new wife, Emily, brought light back into my life when I didn't think it was possible. But life can be cruel in unexpected ways. Not long after the wedding, I got hit with the diagnosis: lung cancer. It felt like the ground was pulled from beneath me. Since then, everything's changed. I've lost so much energy, and there are days when it's hard to get out of bed. But Emily, she's my rock. She's the one keeping me going, keeping me hopeful even when the doctors say the future looks bleak. We've been trying chemotherapy, fighting this thing with everything we've got, but I can feel the toll it's taking on my body. It's a strange thing, knowing your time is limited. You start to think about what really matters. And for me, that's leaving something behind, some part of me that can live on even after I'm gone. Emily knows this, and she's been by my side every step of the way. In these final days, I find myself reflecting on the lessons I've learned. Maybe it's because I don't have much time left, or maybe it's because my mind is slipping too. I can feel it. My thoughts aren't as sharp as they used to be, and I worry that soon I won't be able to say the things I need to say. So before it's too late, I want to share whatever wisdom I've gathered over these long, messy years. I hope that those of you reading this, especially the younger folks, can take something away from my story. Life isn't perfect. You'll make mistakes and sometimes you'll lose your way. But don't let the hard times define you. Find the people who care about you, hold on to them, and never be too proud to admit when you've messed up. It's never too late to turn things around, even when the odds seem impossible. I hope in some small way my story can make your journey a little better. Take care of yourselves, and always remember that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a reason to keep going.